The Landman Season 2 finale is here, and after what's been an extremely underwhelming season of the show, this episode really did go back to its roots and give us the best installment of the entire season. It had action, it had risk, it had threat, and it had Billy Bob Thornton giving us arguably one of the best performances as Tommy Norris. With an ending that showed us that Cami was quite literally captaining a sinking ship and that Tommy, with the most important thing in his life, his family at his core, he was now going to create a future where the rush and buzz that Cami said that he didn't have was going to be at the core. So let's dive into the ending of the season, discuss what it all means, especially that Coyote scene, and I'll share how it'll impact Season 3. Here is Landman Season 2 Episode 10 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Tommy Norris. This entire episode was carried by Billy Bob Thornton as Tommy Norris. It was his best performance of the season, and we truly got to see what was going on inside of the character's mind. With the episode starting with him sitting in his father's spot watching the sunrise, it almost insinuated that Tommy was going to be adopting the mindset of TL. One where he'd be aware that life was just going to be getting by him and he was going to essentially be waiting for the end. This came off the back of him being fired, but in actual fact, it was the opposite. Tommy wasn't ready to retire or move on to another project. The words that Cami said to him when he was being fired was motivating him to have one final hurrah and a desire to make something of himself all over again. With the wells that Cooper found that M-Tex had no idea about, he planned on essentially opening his own company, CTT, which stood for Cooper, Tommy and Thomas, and drilling on the land that the entire world essentially missed. All he needed was somebody to front him the money and back his idea. This very person was Dan Morrell. With Cami throwing Tommy under the bus, he went to Dan and essentially told him how Cami's project was most likely going to fail because she didn't have a clue what she was doing. Nate summed it up best to her when he said that the company was never supposed to outlive Monty, and as we saw with Monty now gone, it was essentially a sinking ship that Cami was the captain of. People were leaving and she risked all of her chips in Louisiana, something that Monty would never have done. Tommy went to Dan Morrell to essentially see if he'd honor the original deal that he had with Cooper and to offer Dan Morrell the 50-50 cut that he originally wanted. The thing with Morrell was that he always believed in Tommy, and that was the reason why he originally backed Cami. So again, he backed Tommy and gave him the money. However, there was one final thread. He said that if Tommy tried to screw him over, then he'd come for him and take away the thing that he loved most in the world, which, as we know, is his family. There was a point where it felt like everything was going to go wrong for Tommy, such as him finding out that Cooper was being charged with murder, Angela finding out that he lost his job, and he wasn't getting the backing that he needed. When that car crash happened on the freeway, it almost showed how his life could be taken within the blink of an eye, and that Tommy was pushing himself to the limit. Right at the end of the episode, with CTT oil exploration and cattle being opened by Tommy, the crew that we've seen throughout the entirety of the show essentially left M-Tex and joined forces with him. It was a better deal for them. This was going to be a new, thriving company where they'd make more money and their future would be guaranteed. As well as Tommy being content within his work life, we also saw that with Angela, he listened to her and saw her as the person that she was for the first time in the season. This was as somebody who wants to make the small moments in life memorable, and I thought that was quite a tender moment. With the final thing that Tommy saw being the Coyote, the very thing that symbolized death coming for him at the end of Season 1, he said, "You can't have today. Today is mine," as he then walked away. This showed that he won, death didn't win, and his life didn't come crumbling down with him being fired by M-Tex. There was also a beauty in him walking back to the house as the sun was setting. The sun was setting on the day and it was ending in a completely different way to how it began for him. It started with him watching it rise and it concluded with him walking away from its setting. It was a great shot. Cooper and Ariana. Following on from Ariana being attacked in the previous episode, this episode saw the cops coming down hard on Cooper for defending her. The guy ended up dying after Cooper hit him 17 times, and he now had a murder charge hanging over him. This was something that not only added to the stress of Tommy as he needed to find a way of sorting that out, but it was also putting pressure on the situation for Cooper. This was the story where we got to see the Rebecca that I've been talking about wanting back on our screens for weeks. Rebecca was brought in as Cooper's lawyer, and her whole speech about being a life ruiner was incredible to watch. The delivery was just perfect, and seeing the cops in the room getting put in their place transported me right back to Season 1 with Rebecca. I did find it a bit strange that the detectives were on the offensive so much with Cooper, considering the evidence was there that the man tried to attack Ariana and he was just trying to defend her. I get that the man died and Cooper went into overkill mode, so it was serious, but I found the judging of him as if he was a cold-blooded killer that got enjoyment out of it just a bit strange. We ultimately saw that Tommy mentioned how the people of the county would most likely turn against the police force if news about the case got out, and that the mayor would fire members within, and that was enough to stop the case from rising to the surface again and for Cooper to be let off the murder charge. I was glad to see Cooper with a smile on his face at the end because he'd worked so hard to improve his life from a career perspective and also his relationship, and this was the very thing that gave it the chance of being undone. But now the season finished with him being the president of his own company and his relationship being in the best way possible. Angela and Ainsley. Now, I come on here every week and moan about these two characters, but do you know what? Fair play, Taylor Sheridan. The characters actually felt like they had purpose in this finale. Ainsley's whole college arc, her repairing her relationship with Pagan and them understanding that they can be friends even though they're different, and also realizing that they just needed to communicate was a nice message to have at the core of the character. Plus, once it was paired with Angela almost mourning her child's youth and the fact that Ainsley was now growing up and wanting to move away from home, Angela almost felt like she was losing a limb because there was going to be this emptiness that was inside of her. A child leaving the nest is a feeling that any parent can relate to, and I feel giving Angela a story that had substance like that was what it felt like the show was crying out for to make her a little bit more relatable. She wasn't just shopping or hanging out with the old folk, she actually had meaning. I also felt like seeing a sense of fear in her eyes when she found out that Tommy was fired and her worrying that it was going to be like 2008 all over again cut through the screen. Angela felt like she had purpose for the first time in the show, so I hope that we get to see more of that in Season 3. My review of the finale. I thought this was easily the strongest episode of Landman Season 2. If there's a time to give us the best episode, the finale is definitely the place to do it. I do feel like this season was a bit poor and there wasn't that much action within it, but the risk in this final episode and it feeling like Tommy could quite literally lose it all added a level of intensity to the show that it needed throughout the entirety of it. In terms of the performances, I thought Billy Bob Thornton delivered his best performance as Tommy Norris from across both seasons. I bought the emotion that was present within him, the stress levels that he had, the desire to make something of himself one final time, and that rush that Cami said he never chased. This was why Billy Bob Thornton was cast in this role, because it was just perfect and it felt so real. I also thought Rebecca was performed so well in this episode as well. It's funny, isn't it, how when Charlie Newsom isn't there, she instantly becomes a better character. The fierce, sharp tongue that she had, which put fear inside all of the people in law enforcement, was not only entertaining to see, but it was powerful to watch. I'd been waiting for Rebecca to adopt the personality trait that made her character so good in Season 1, and it finally came out in the finale, so I was pleased. I did think it was a bit of a shame that Cami wasn't in the finale more than what she was. I almost wanted to see the company sinking, but it was just mainly insinuated that it was going to. I thought it was quite powerful when Nate said that the company was never supposed to outlive Monty, because it highlighted how she was essentially just trying to keep the company alive so that she could feel close to her dead husband. When looking back at Landman Season 2, I'll probably remember it for being a season that could have offered more, and did ultimately fall short when compared to what we got in the first season. However, I am glad that it redeemed itself when it came to the ending. At least we know the show is coming back for a Season 3, so I imagine we'll see M-Tex's failings and Tommy's rise to success being explored even more. So, there you have it, Landman Season 2 Episode 10 Ending Explained.